story. Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is going to make it official very soon, announcing his 2024 presidential run. He'll be going up against Trump, of course, who right now is most likely to get the nomination. We'll see if DeSantis can mix things up. I've said it before we get to a clip here of this being outlined. He's likely going to file paperwork next week with an announcement shortly after, making himself an official candidate. I do not want, when thinking about DeSantis or Trump, either of those individuals to be president of the United States. That would be disastrous. But I love the idea of DeSantis getting in the race to hopefully cause some division within the party, and maybe those divisions won't be able to be reconciled in the general election within the Republican Party, and that will hurt them against obviously most likely Joe Biden as the nominee on the Democratic side. So with that being said, we'll discuss further. I'll bring you to side in just a second. But first, here's this being reported on from CNN.
Just tell CNN, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis expected to make it official next week, officially entering the 2024 presidential race sometime next week. He'll file paperwork with the Federal Election Commission declaring his candidacy and is expected to make his official announcement from his hometown the following week. DeSantis tells CNN.
So there it goes. We've been waiting for quite a while now, and we'll see how that all plays out. Where do you stand on the whole DeSantis candidacy? Do you think he has a chance of really taking away support from Trump, or is it more just kind of a mix things up moment?
Well, he certainly doesn't have my vote, but none of them do. I think at this point, I almost wonder if it's too little too late. It's interesting. You look at the rock, paper, scissors effect of politics, because if Ron DeSantis had gotten the nomination, which I suppose he might, he stands something of a chance, not much of one these days, but he certainly stands the best chance besides Trump. If he were to get the Republican nomination, you and I have talked about this before publicly and privately, we're pretty sure that Donald Trump is enough of a narcissist and a spiteful egotist that he would run as a third party independent spoiler candidate just to spite DeSantis, right? So it's interesting to imagine the alternative situation in which, Trump gets the nomination, as he's likely to do. Would DeSantis drop out of the Republican nomination and run as a third party spoiler? I doubt it. But basically, no matter what happens, I want these two to trip over each other. And there's the possibility that could happen. But I don't know. I at the end of the day, DeSantis has a problem. Well, he has many problems. One of the big ones is, he's running so far to the right. He's the right-wing culture warrior. He's going to protect your gas stoves. He's going to, belly punch
Disney.
Mickey Mouse. Yeah, right. He's going to do all these things. That doesn't resonate with most Americans. And then on the major matters of policy, not just culture war talking points, but like abortion laws. Right. He's running as far right as he can possibly get on the issue of abortion. That's not going to do him any favors with the general electorate. And that's the thing that's actually really interesting. It'll be interesting to see that reality check for Republicans, because, as I've said before, not that everything in life is a popularity contest, not that simply because a thing is popular, that makes it right. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party and Democratic leaning voters and Democratic policies, they are all more popular and more plentiful than the Republican Party. So if there's a little voice in DeSantis's head saying, listen, run as far right, as long as we lock in the GOP vote, we're going to, moonwalk into the White House on, January 2025. It's not going to happen, man. They just don't have the numbers.
Yeah. Do you have the New York Times piece on you there for me to jump into real quick? Okay, we're going to read this and then a lot more to say on what Josiah just noted there. So one bit of reporting that came out kind of around the same time is this from the New York Times. If you could just scroll to, that quote there. He said during a call with donors, quote, "You have basically three people at this point that are credible in this whole thing." This is DeSantis talking to donors on a call. Biden, Trump, and me. And I think of those three, two have a chance to get elected president. Biden and me, based on all the data in the swing states, which is not great for the former president and probably insurmountable because people aren't going to change their view of him. So I understand what he's saying, where Biden obviously has a chance to win. He beat Trump before, he's the incumbent, all of that. But DeSantis, what he's trying to say is you either are going to have, most likely, something crazy could happen and hopefully doesn't. The polling has been kind of concerning recently, where Trump could, if he got the nomination, win. That would be a disaster. We'll do everything to make sure it doesn't happen. But most likely, just from a political analysis point of view, based on everything that Trump is wrapped up in, it would be really hard for him to win. He lost to Biden before, and everything that's happened since. So then you think, okay, so then maybe a more baggage-free Republican, more moderate Republican could win. Yeah, maybe. But the issue is, Josiah, as you were just noting, the way that DeSantis is trying to set himself apart from Trump is not by saying I'm the more moderate guy. He's trying to kind of say I'm more of a traditional politician maybe, and I don't have the baggage. But he's running to the right of Trump, or trying to, on policy, to say to the MAGA base, which you'll have to get some of to be the nominee right now because of how MAGA the Republican Party is. He's saying, I'm even more radical on the issue of abortion, for example. Now, Trump has had, to this point, the most devastating impact on abortion rights with his nominations of the justices that led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But DeSantis signed a 6-week abortion ban into law. Trump hasn't clearly said that he's supportive of a 6-week abortion ban when asked about it. And now DeSantis is publicly, I covered this on the show recently, criticizing Trump for not saying he would support a 6-week abortion ban. And if the primary becomes Trump and DeSantis trying to argue over who is more far right and taking stances on that, then in the general, even if DeSantis were somehow able to win, he would be so closely associated with the most unpopular parts of American politics, including a 6-week abortion ban.
Yeah. So that's the I don't know what adjective I'm looking here, because I almost said beautiful.
Dumb. No, okay.
Because in some ways it is, from just a political analysis perspective, but it's also quite dangerous too, because the Republican Party, despite its lack of popularity and despite the lack of popularity and efficacy of its record and the policies it proposes, it's still a threat to the United States. So what I'm about to say, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it is interesting that the Republican Party has escalated to the extent to win a primary, especially against somebody like Trump, you got to go as radical right as it gets to try to steal MAGA from him.
Yeah.
But that is a mutually exclusive proposition to winning an election. The tactic that, at least on paper right now, will let you win a primary is the thing that will cost you the general. And that is something of the Republican Party's own making. They are being hoisted by their own petard. So obviously, no sympathy for them whatsoever. They had every chance before Trump, during Trump, and even in the immediate aftermath of Trump to turn and say, listen, even if it costs us some elections for the foreseeable future, we need to do some serious introspection, some serious accountability, excise, purge this instinct towards fascism and derangement that Trump manifested, and let's go back to being a more serious party, and then maybe we'll get some long-term gains. But that's not what they did. And I think we're seeing DeSantis try to straddle these lines, because he's going to have to present himself to the 49 other states outside of Florida. That's the other thing. Like, I know Florida is a very populated state, but there's the rest of the country to consider. How on earth Ron DeSantis of Disney feuding Florida, 6-week abortion ban Florida, how are you possibly going to make a sales pitch to Wisconsin, to California, to whatever, even just the swing states? How can you possibly do that? Yeah.
And what you were saying about the Republican Party, they've had every chance to run away from this, to decide not to do what DeSantis is doing in Florida, just recently signing a ban on gender affirming care for minors that includes the ability of the state to take away children from their families, party of family values, children from their families if they're receiving gender affirming care. That and that being the direction that the GOP is going is because of step after step that was obviously heading in this direction, being allowed by the rest of the GOP for so long. So now, one of the things that's funny about DeSantis' campaign is he's having a really hard time, even just his pre-campaign, deciding how does he approach Trump. He doesn't want to criticize him aggressively because, as you said, you need to kind of sell yourself to the MAGA base as well, and also maybe get some other people and all of that. And so he's not actually criticizing Trump aggressively, except for a little bit here and there, and he'll allude to things because he's so terrified of Trump's movement. And that conundrum, that situation that DeSantis will have to deal with, and likely his embarrassing loss to Trump, is because of what he allowed to happen, what other Republicans allowed to happen, him kissing up to Trump in the ways that he has for so long. That is on you, Republican Party. And now, if the rest of the country can work hard enough and get us through this scary moment, it's going to be the reason that the Republican Party ends up losing time and time again. Hopefully, that's my prediction. And whenever you're regretting that, whenever it's feeling horrible, Republicans, whenever it's just brutal that you can't get rid of Trumpism, you made the bed.
Absolutely. The only two things I'll add to that are, because it just now hit me, there was the recent election in Jacksonville, Florida, one of the most populous states in the country, the highest cities in the country, and one of the most, the highest populated city that was governed by a Republican mayor.
There we go.
They lost. A Democrat is now the mayor of Jacksonville, and that is in the heartland of Florida, right? That's Ron DeSantis nation. So that's another thing that he's going to have to answer for to the public. Hey, you talk about winning and how you're such a winner. Why is it that in your state, the most populous city in your state, which you supposedly have on lock, your candidate, the candidate not only that is Republican, but the DeSantis endorsed and backed, how did that candidate lose?
Thank you so much for watching this video. For the outro, I want to quickly plug Josiah's channel. Hit them with it, Josiah.
All right, folks, you can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, one word. If you like progressive politics, if you like the Republican Party being called out, and if you like collaborations with Luke Beasley, hit me up there.